All right, I am very excited to be part of this seminar. Welcome, everybody. And of course, we're going to start our work right away. So, of course, to start, I wanted to simply introduce the concept of intercultural communication when it came first to be. So, really, when we are thinking about intercultural communication, and especially the barriers, the first metaphor was used in 1952, and the metaphor was the fish out of water. And this metaphor really talked specifically about culture shock. And really, when we are talking about publications with the intercultural communication as a concept, it appeared in the book The Silent Language in 1959. So really, when we're talking about intercultural communication, we don't have a very, very long history. However, I think in the meantime, we have developed quite a number of barriers. And now in the global world, we understand how important it is to deal with them. I'm not going to get into history of that, but of course, right now, I would like to start with the introduction of the course. And during the course, you're going to meet 3 teachers. I am going to be just one of them. And of course, you're going to see 2 me's in a very different persona. So at the very beginning, I am going to invite you to view the first video. It would be the first attempt. The links are fairly long, so Padlet is the best option. So for those who finished, thank you. And now on Padlet, you are going to see a column that says reaction to video 1, and it says truth. And I really wanted you to react very quickly. What thoughts or a thought crossed your mind as you got introduced to the course by this first me teacher? So maybe a couple of observations, 1 thought, 2 thoughts that got into your mind. I will really appreciate your quick reaction. Right, lots of very interesting questions, and I think that's definitely very interesting to hear these reactions, right? Formal, distant, boring, very classic presentation, monotonous, waifu figure, right? Lost focus, somewhere in the middle. Or I can do something else, right? And so on and so on. And so having experienced the first video, now I am going to ask you to join and watch the second one. The second one is a bit longer. It's about 10 minutes, but please bear with me. I am sure I have a purpose for this. So again, now you're going to click on the second attempt and you're going to watch the second one about 10 minutes. All right, I see that many of you are finishing and I'm getting some feedback. Obviously, very, very interesting. I am... my face is lit by a smile. It's very nice to hear the different, more modern approach, but also, on the other hand, still very long, still a bit boring, right? More problematic, focused on experience. I see first was more boring, shorter. So sort of combining the both, right? More enjoyable, personal, however, quite long, more interesting, yet friendly, interesting, long. I think those words are fairly nice. And then the posture was a bit disrespectful, which I am very appreciating these kind of comments because, again, I think we are getting very, very deeply now into this really idea of intercultural communication, where even the first impression can obviously be judged and be accepted in a very, very different way. So for some of you, obviously, the length is not appropriate. Some of you may have felt really with the posture and actually the sitting style. I am surprised I didn't hear any comments more of here is some type of a feminist and immediately making assumptions. lesbian or this or that. So hopefully that sort of crossed your mind in terms of maybe the dressing style, also the sitting position and the posture. Believe me, those were intentional, even though maybe I'm not super good at doing something that I am not. But I was really aiming to present very, very different types of introductions, different teachers, and also opinions that kind of very quickly get formed. And sometimes it's very difficult to get out of these opinions because, this is it. We've done it. And now we really have to live with it, with that introduction that we have. So most of the time when I am in a classroom, I actually do these introductions by myself. I run and change, and I come back into the classroom and I start working with the students again, and then I run out and then I come back. And so there's a little bit more life, but I actually have had students with a certain tolerance that absolutely walked out of the workshop after the first listening, because they said there's no way I am going to take a course with a teacher who is this authoritative. So obviously lots of discussions came about, and I hope that you had a very similar experience. And the aim of the introduction for our workshop was to show 3 different styles of introductions, where the first was definitely based on authority, where I am stressing mostly my degrees. I've received this, right, this university, sort of really that very a non-Western probably idea at this point, that degrees make the authority, not really your knowledge, but I am simply bragging on the titles. Based on experience, you saw the second video where my expertise comes from really all different situations that I've been to, and these stories can be quite long. And again, I think here we're going to see a different tolerance. I think 21st century COVID-19, learning online, our tolerance is being reduced even further, even though everybody said that 10 minutes is kind of that acceptable time frame to talk. We are losing that as well. So again, that was that second example. And now I would like to introduce myself, probably more in my natural environment, where the principle of teaching and participating in workshops is going to be based on practical participation. So sort of hoping that the students build their own knowledge, and they make their own understandings based on especially crafted situations. So having said that, I am also going to start this session from something very, very I guess the beginning stages of of every kind of situation. When you meet a person, typically you engage in a small talk. And I think everybody is quite familiar with small talk. And I was wondering if there would be a volunteer who would like to engage with me into a small talk for just a very, very short moment. Would that be possible? Would I get a volunteer who would like to try a small talk? We would have a small talk together.
Vaida, I could be your volunteer if no one else wanted.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I hear some voice, so I'm definitely going to take my opportunity. And really very simple. We're just going to have a small talk. So I am going to start, right? And I say, hey, how are you today?
Hey, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm very excited about this workshop.
What about your week?
It was busy.
Did you work a lot?
Yeah, I was very, very busy.
So, are you going to have some rest in your weekend?
I hope so. I think after this workshop, I will probably take some time to enjoy myself.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for engaging in this. And I wonder, the audience, as you were listening, whether you had an easy time following this small talk or a hard time. And I really want to say thank you. Obviously, I have a person here um, from probably this intense culture where the person likes to talk a lot, because typically when I do this exercise with my students from the classroom in Lithuania, I say, "Hi, how are you?" And everybody says, "Hi, I'm fine." And there's this dead silence and nobody is saying anything. And of course, the people are expecting me to always ask questions, and I don't ask. And there's this dead silence, and everybody's looking with the eyes full of fear. What's happening here? What am I supposed to say? And then, depending on the tolerance, on how much we can tolerate the silence, people start asking questions. And so in this sample, we had questions. So thank you very much for continuously asking questions. But now what I did, I purposely provided very short answers. I was not very friendly because I really didn't ask, "And so how about you?" Right? Because typically in a small talk, it's an engage or exchange between two people. So if I ask, I should answer, and then I should follow up with a question. That's sort of a very normal way. And the usual response, especially if it's very short after two questions, the other speaker would naturally understand, oh, she's not interested in talking. Probably she's really busy, doesn't have time. So I would just say, okay, see you next time, right? Kind of finishing the conversation as soon as possible. And so again, even on a very, very simple task, we are engaging in quite a few intercultural communication issues. How much do I talk? How much silence can I tolerate? When do I stop? When do I move on? So here we have to talk probably about two different cultures, and I would like to thank for that wonderful sample. Two different types of cultures, the low intensity and high intensity cultures. These are the concepts that have been designed by Hall, but other researchers continued working on the scale. And if we're talking about low intensity culture, we're talking about USA and most of Europe. Probably a couple of things that I could stress, that we are really trying to work on individualism, very high self-esteem, body language is very open, lots of open hands, right? No crossed arms, fists or hands, right? You really need to show your palms, showing your openness. Obviously, tolerance for difference. There is quite a degree of tolerance for difference. And when we're talking about high intensity cultures, now we're talking about much more formal style. So even in the introductions, at the very first exercise, when we talked about the teacher with authority, we can already see that it's the high intensity culture feature, where I'm trying to really separate. I tolerate silence. Time has a very, very different meaning. If nobody is talking for a minute, I can be very, very comfortable and I am not pushed to talk. Where if you are actually from a low intensity culture, 10-second silence and people feel very anxious. They already have to move on and they have to fill the silence with some kind of a conversation. So these rules are very particular in different styles. And of course, there's there are implications, and then of course those barriers that occur due to these differences. Now, where is Lithuania on this scale? I would say it's much more on a high intensity culture, but also we're moving very much to low intensity culture. So it's kind of personal, I think, depending on how much exposure a person to traveling to to different cultures also received. It's not so dry cut anymore as Hall presented in 1973. I think at that time globalization was not so important, right? So this concept naturally allowed to put people in very different locations. Another feature that I want to really talk about is probably facing problems, or how we deal with a barrier, with a problem that occurs. So if a cultural barrier happens, typically a person from a low content culture, or low content, maybe even understanding perception, they would face the problem, they would try to mediate, try to talk about it, try to cooperate, find compromises, definitely would show very high respect for different opinion. And I think one of the most important features would be that if there is a conflict, I will understand that I dislike the situation, but I still like the person. The person with whom I had a conflict is not my enemy. On the other hand, when we're talking people who come from high context culture, they typically have indirect communication, and most of the time they will like to stay behind the scenes. So sometimes just slamming the door and not engaging in the conflict would be the best solution. They would say, okay, well, we are just simply different, and the difference is going to explain the reason for conflict. And one of the most important things is that conflict means an insult. So if we have a disagreement about something, I immediately get insulted at you. I dislike you because you brought the conflict onto me. And I think, again, looking at these differences, I would like you to think a little bit about the differences and really sort of see where it takes you. So moving on with the workshop, I would like you to imagine that you have an amazing Erasmus Plus project, and you have to work on this project for a year with a partner. And my question would be, what two top choices you would make? Which would be your two people that you would like to work with? Mostly, let me think. I see a lot of eights, I think. I see. What else is dominating? 8 is dominating. 12 maybe is dominating. There are a couple of 11s, maybe some ones. And I think very few 5s, very few 4s. I'm just checking. So let's look at these pictures one more time, and let's really think about it, right? So mostly I see number 11, I see number 12, number 8, and I would like to ask, obviously now it's very interesting to analyze why we make these selections. So typically it tells quite a bit also about our exposure and our cultural tolerance. This is an exercise that has been designed by one researcher, and I thought I had it on my slides, but apparently I didn't put his name on the slide. I'm sorry. But he did exactly the same experiment with the bus. If you get on the bus and you had to choose a seat, which kind of type of a person would you sit next to? And the idea was that most of the time we are going to choose a very safe option. And I wonder if these are your answers as well. Why are you choosing certain people to sit or to work with? For me, I was actually choosing number 2, it was an older woman with glasses, and I don't know, and I was wondering why, and I had to really kind of dig a bit deeper, and really thinking about that, for me, I realized that really most of my teachers have been female. And really, I think in my career, oh my God, many, many years of school, I probably can count about 4 male teachers in my life. And so I would never choose a male character to work for a year, simply because this is not comfortable for me, because most of my life I've been really working with women. I'm also thinking glasses, right? Again, a sort of a stereotype that comes to mind, that people with glasses are typically really smart, diligent, right? So maybe I will have less work to do, but also I will learn a lot, because this person is obviously enjoying the work. So I wonder if you can probably think a little bit deeper and try to analyze, is there anything in your childhood or in your life experiences that makes you choose one or another person? Sometimes, of course, when we are in a low cultural understanding, we choose people that are very different, because it takes us out of comfort zone, and we're seeking for that difference, and we want and we tolerate difference. So for us, it's sort of a new experience that will enrich our cultural or not stereotypes, but cultural understanding. Intercultural barriers are going to be destroyed, and we are very purposely choosing different things. And again, I am just trying to see if there are some ideas. I don't think you are posting really as to the reasons why, but I don't think it's as important right now for us to analyze it. I think all of you have to really decide for yourself, why did you choose that, and what does it say about your cultural understanding and your cultural tolerance uh, for these choices. And of course, when we come to this, right, we can definitely come to very big stereotypes. We can say, okay, well, this is because you are from a certain culture. But of course, then sometimes we are completely unique. We behave very differently from the norms, from things that happen in our cultures. And I think here, this is where it's important to really think about this interconnection between, or actually the understanding of the very, very simple definition. Because when we talk about intercultural communication, we immediately uh, get stuck with culture. So the interrelationship with what is culture, what is mini culture, and then we have to really think that a very important part is your unique culture. I think all of us are very, very unique. Our experiences make us choose different things, right? Even though probably that preference for 11, 12, and 8 kind of gives me an indication of what kind of audience and preferences and comfort zones we might have in the audience. So I am going to ask you to scan this code, and I hope that it works. If it does not work, again, on Padlet, you have a code and also a URL address, so you will be able to participate in the poll. And the first question is about mini cultures. I am skipping what is culture, because I assume you guys definitely know. I think you would probably bring quite a few things like the language, clothing, music, and so on and so on. But now I really want you to focus a bit on mini culture. So what is mini culture? So here I'm asking you to write 3 words that you associate with mini culture. And maybe the concept is not very clear yet, but I wanted to say that within a large culture, we typically have very specific cultures. And I will just give you one example. I think university is a type of culture with a very specific language, with a very specific dress code sometimes. I think we can talk about our hobbies. Sometimes we participate in a certain hobby, and that can be a certain culture. For example, I am dancing salsa, so obviously that Latino salsa dancer culture, people are behaving, talking, and doing things in a certain way. So hopefully some of these ideas will come up. All right, so we are getting some samples. Again, food, mini culture means small. I have style, I have traditions, music, idiolects, regions, which definitely, I think, different dialects, right? Dialectic groups, art. So I think this understanding sometimes is also very much interconnected also with the large idea of culture, because I would say that traditions, they can be, let's say, Lithuanian, Italian, German, Polish, and so on traditions, but at the same time, there could be traditions that are particular to a certain university, or let's say a work organization, a medical field. Nurses maybe have very particular traditions in the job. I think I really like inside jokes. Religion can definitely be a very small part or group that we are involved. So I think this is very, very interesting to look at, and to see that some of these cultural concepts are very, very obvious to us, but sometimes they are completely hidden. Sometimes we may know, let's say, the traditional setting for a certain culture. Let's say I studied English. So the question is typically, can you tell me about American culture? And can you tell about American traditions? And again, here I have to be very, very careful by saying that I can probably represent only Chicagoan culture or Chicagoan traditions, and maybe also not to the full extent. Probably I can talk about traditions in Chicago from people who are sort of very similar to me, similarly educated, similar values on food, music that I listen to, and so on, because otherwise, again, I am going to be ignoring other parts of culture. And I think, again, that intercultural communication can also mean that how the person is describing the culture, right? What are you saying? Are you saying that I represent only a very small group, or I actually talk about American culture in general? Because I think sometimes there are quite a few conflicts when people are talking about, let's say, Lithuania, or they're talking about, and you say, well, wait a second, but this is not true, right? And there we can immediately get conflicts in that sense as well. So I haven't looked at that. Now I would like to invite you to do one more. Now with the second slide, I want you to do exactly the same, since you are still connected. Now when we talk about cultural barriers, and keep in mind all these little things that you've been adding, what barriers do you feel are the most significant, or what comes to your mind at the moment? So again, let's try to take a minute and see now specifically to barriers. Where do we see conflicts? I'm very happy that language is mentioned as one of the barriers, but also we are looking at time understanding, language, traditions, stereotypes, religion, and so on, right? So and many more interesting observations are coming up, biases, different perspectives, believing in own culture. I am just testing to see how what kind of ideas you have, and how am I going to fulfill maybe some of these expectations that you have. So definitely very interesting. Thank you very much for posting. Thank you for participating and giving me that feedback that I think sometimes is very important when you don't see people or their faces. At least I'm getting very interesting reactions, and of course gestures. So absolutely, I think we have covered now quite a few communication barriers. I think I am just going to say that many of these barriers that you talked about, they are very deep culture barriers, because they're not very visible on the surface. And I really don't think that the intention of this workshop for me is to really talk about visible cultural barriers. I think I am much more interested in examining some deeper level cultural barriers. So one of the things that I thought I will do is I will ask you to participate in a game. And really, we are going to observe how we understand timing. And this is going to be a very simple exercise. I think this is a very timely exercise, because we have had about an hour of the workshop. So this is time to stretch a little bit, right? And I hope you guys do a bit. And I think it's going to be very nice to close your eyes for about a minute. And what I will ask you to do is very simple. Please close your eyes when I say close. I hope everybody will close the eyes. I hope in your mind you're going to count. And then when you open up your eyes, I hope that you will check the time. I will actually have the screen with the time. So please don't look at the clock. Please don't observe anything. Just enjoy yourself, right? You guys are going to meditate for 60 seconds right now. You will close your eyes. You will count to 60. And then when you finish, you open your eyes. The screen will have a clock. I want you to record the time, and or at least remember, and maybe we will record on Padlet. All right, and I hope that most of you have your eyes open right now, because this has been 1 minute and 10 seconds or so. I'm not sure. I'm also checking accurately because I had to pause. But on Padlet now, I have another window that says, please record your time. So I just wonder if you were able to calculate and see if your minute is actually a minute. And I think this is a very good exercise to realize that our timing is very different. I can see that some people were very accurate, and they managed to actually calculate to precision, where it was really about 1 minute. Some of you were 56 seconds, some of you were maybe 58 or so, and some, got a bit longer. And I think here it's interesting to see that sometimes we tell our students, especially if we are in a teaching environment, right? And people say, well, just think a minute. And our minute, I think in our minds is very different. It can go, as you can see here, from 40 seconds to actually 1 minute and 10 seconds. And again, that probably shows somewhere in the spectrum of low intensity and high intensity culture. where you are at, because individually, even if you are from Europe and from United States, you are considered to be low intensity, so you should be rushing all the time. But you may realize that, hey, you can relax, and you are not always in this magic massive rush. So this is definitely one of those exercises that helps me to get you to relax, right? Maybe to refurbish your energy, but at the same time to show that time is definitely very, very different for all of us. And right now, because we are back to low and high intensity cultures, I wanted to present a little dialogue for you. So this comes from a research based article, and it goes like this. Looks like we will have to call some people to work this week. Sorry, one word got cut. Uh-huh. Can you come this Saturday? Suppose I could. That would be really great. Yes, Saturday is very special. Yes, Saturday is special. Saturday is my son's birthday. Super. I hope you all have a good time. Thanks for understanding. All right. So here we got a very nice conversation about a birthday. And my question is, did the person get excused from coming to work on Saturday? Did the boss agree that he doesn't have to come? Or there was just a confusion and the person did not get excused and he is going to get in trouble? Because I think person A understood that, or I'm sorry, person B understood that I think he gets excused, but maybe he wasn't. So I don't know, thumbs up, thumbs down. I know you guys have this feature also on the on Teams. Would you say he got excused, or would you say he did not get excused? Thumbs up, yes, he got excused. Thumb down, no, he did not get excused. Aha, we have also confusing faces and all kinds of reactions. So I guess this is a very interesting difference that was documented by the researcher of a high intensity culture person who has a very difficult time to say no. And he is sending a number of different signals. No, I'm not, no, I'm not coming. No, I'm not coming. Because even from the very beginning of the conversation, looks like we have to call some people to work this Saturday. The person already with the kind of gives a signal that I am not interested, sort of, okay, well, not good. And then, of course, can you come this Saturday? The person cannot say no because this is not polite. So suppose I could any other Saturday, like sort of saying that normally I could on Saturdays, but this Saturday really I cannot. Then, of course, number A is still not convinced, so that would be really great. And then, of course, B has to push a bit. So now he continues to produce the hints that it's a special day, it's the son's birthday, I really need this day off. And when the boss finally says, I hope you have a good time, he immediately understood that he is excused, that he does not have to come. Unfortunately, I think that does not mean that he got excused. It really means that, you should have a good time after you work on Saturday. So we can see how from this dialogue, both people, or actually the high intensity culture person knew the intention, but was not brave enough to just say, no, I can't come. And the person.
Excuse me, but I have a question. Why it's so bad to say no? I can't come on this Saturday. Why I would react this way? I would say no, I can't come this Saturday because it's my son's birthday. End of the story.
Yeah, I think, and that depends on your cultural understanding, but you have to understand that some people and some cultures are very uncomfortable by saying no, it's not acceptable. It's not something that you can say to a boss. Maybe you will say it to your family members, it's okay, but based on the rank, based on the position in an office, you may not have this cultural awareness, and you may not be brave enough, and that's where the miscommunication can happen. We have to be aware that there are very many people who will be afraid to face the authority and
But,
say, no, I
but
cannot do it.
excuse me, but isn't it much worse than, if, for example, if the person believes that he has a chance not to come, and the boss believes that he must come? So I think that beating around the bush it's far more complex in this situation than simply telling, I'm sorry, I can't come this Saturday because it's my son's birthday. I don't see any problem here. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. So, for you, maybe it's not a problem, but there are people who will not be able to do that, for whom it's very difficult. And I think it depends on their tolerance level, on their ability to communicate. I think we have to acknowledge that there are people like this. And for us, especially, I think for people coming from low intensity culture, we have to really listen and pay attention. Is this person giving me a hint? Is he not comfortable saying? And maybe, again, I would probably clarify. I don't know. I think my reaction would be the same. I would probably say, so what you mean is that you are not coming, right? Or, I mean, I would reconfirm. Unfortunately, in the situation, the person was completely oblivious that there was even a miscommunication. I think the person thought it was a normal dialogue. So
But
that's
excuse me one more time. But I think at the very end of the dialogue, the person A says, "Super, I hope you all have a good time." Doesn't it mean that he just gives him an excuse? I hope you all have a good time. He means the entire family, I believe.
right. But after work, you can all have a wonderful time in the birthday. Come to work
Well,
on Saturday. The birthday is in the evening.
that's what I wanted to emphasize. It's much more easier to say no. I'm sorry, I cannot come this Saturday, and that's it. It's too
I
complex
agree.
for me, for example, to think what other person might think, what he had in mind. It's much easier to clarify once and for all.
I think we would be in a very happy world if everybody spoke what they wanted. But I think we also very clearly know that we don't always feel comfortable saying what we mean. Sometimes we really beat around the bush because we want to be polite, because we think we don't want to insult the person, and it just really, I think this is the awareness issue, where most, or not most, many times we're not even aware of the conflict that is brewing, because we simply don't have time, or we don't want to pay attention to what is happening. We are communicating from our perspective, and the other person may be communicating from his perspective. And that's where the intercultural barrier occurs, and sometimes it is really not being aware of the rules. And the more of the rules that you know, the easier it is to overcome it. But I think this was a very good example to show the fact that we are having a debate here. I think it's very interesting, because sometimes we don't even pay attention, and we just say, well, why don't you say no? Of course, yes, this would be a very, very good moment to maybe talk to a person and see, okay, well, why didn't you tell me? Next time, just please be comfortable. But will they do that the next time? I don't know. If culturally they are not aware of that, we have to respect that, and we have to really help maybe the person to deal with the situation. So I am not an expert here in how to solve the problem. I think there are ways, but I am just bringing awareness that people will talk from their personal cultural perspective. And of course, sometimes we will not see it. And I have been in situations where the conflict came too late, where I thought everything was fine because I didn't get the clues. And then all of a sudden, the person bursts. And this is where you know that you have missed something. If you start analyzing, you will probably see the clues. But at the moment, we think, oh, everything's fine. I'm not noticing that. So it's very, very difficult sometimes to notice that. That's why that intercultural communication is, I think, so scary. So moving on, of course, we will be able to discuss. I am just going to try to finish, but thank you so much for interesting observations and questions. This is great. I'm so happy you guys are listening. I wanted to, again, sort of continuing on that same idea, right, talk a little bit about a birthday card, right? And here is a lovely birthday card with a bouquet of flowers. And of course, again, that deep knowledge, can I send this to a person or not? Where I think now we are getting into linguistic awareness, but also cultural awareness. And I think you guys probably know that in some cultures, butterflies bring bad luck. Sometimes people have personal experiences with bees where they are manically afraid of them. And even looking at the card, and especially when it comes with flowers that in Lithuania are meant for funerals, you may think, well, thank you very much for this birthday card because you are just hoping that I am going to die a terrible death. And, all this bad luck with butterflies and the bees will come into my being. So to bring that awareness, I thought I will ask you to write 3 adjectives that would describe a squirrel. And I put a little image here because I was not sure if you guys know what a squirrel is. I'm sure you all do know, but 3 adjectives that come to your mind as you think of a squirrel. All right, just what I expected. I think I have to say, very cool. Again, very, very nice words. I see cute, free, sweet, funny, nice, small, energetic, optimistic. And now you guys are coming with many, many more. So as an English teacher, I would be super happy that now we're getting into more advanced adjectives like hyperactive and so on and so on. Thank you very much for this interaction. What did I want to really say through this exercise is that we have two scientists, Sapir and Worf hypothesis or linguistic relativity hypothesis that really talks about a particular language that one speaks influences the way one thinks about reality. And quite interesting that I think we are, or mostly probably we are European here. We typically think of squirrels as amazing creatures, cute, fragile, and all these adjectives that you guys have seen on the board. However, if you talk to my daughter, who has been raised in Chicago for about 6 years of her life, she has seen squirrels much more in this light where they're angry. They're absolutely nasty. They go into the garbage cans, and when you are passing by, they're so threatened by people that they make this absolutely horrible sound, like ah, 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 and really, really scary. And this poor thing, when she came to Lithuania and she started reading Lithuanian literature, and of course in Lithuanian literature, we have quite a few poems that talk about these nice squirrels jumping up the tree, and they're so fragile and they're so beautiful. And she looks at me and she says, "Mom, these people are crazy. Squirrels are absolutely horrendous. I hate them. And of course, I think here we are talking about how language, but also how our culture shapes our reality. And on that scale, it's much, much more cultural. It's your experience with squirrels, right? She had very bad experience of squirrels. Naturally, she hates squirrels, and her adjectives would be aggressive, angry, nasty, dirty, and so on, right? But I also wanted to draw your attention on a different linguistic barrier. And now we are going to do exactly the same exercise, but now I am going to ask you to write 3 adjectives that describe a bridge, but I want you to write it in your native language. I know that we have people from different countries, so hopefully now on Padlet I will see many languages. And please use the same one for squirrel. So hopefully you will write 3 adjectives to describe a bridge. What comes to your mind when you describe a bridge? All right, so I am seeing a number of different words, which is very, very nice. I recognize some languages, unfortunately, not all of them, but pretty much looking at the descriptions, I can already see some trends. And I think, again, here we are talking or confirming just that very similar hypothesis also that sometimes these perceptions are not only cultural, but they are also very much linguistic, lexical. And what I mean is that many languages are gender based, right? They have grammatical gender. And based on the gender, when we're thinking of certain objects, we immediately attach adjectives that describe these objects. So, for example, for languages that have feminine nouns, and particularly, I know that German, the bridge in German is feminine. People are more likely to describe the bridge as beautiful, elegant, fragile, peaceful, pretty, slender, and so on, right? Using English translations. But I hope this phenomenon also works now that you are translating it. But also, for some languages like Lithuanian, Spanish, Italian, I know Ukrainian, I think Polish as well, I've seen that on the board. The adjectives that are connected to the word would be much more masculine in terms of big, dangerous, long, strong, sturdy, towering, possibly, right? That would show those masculine features. I think this is becoming a very, very interesting conversation now, especially when we are talking about that third gender or transgender issues, and how the descriptions and our literature is going to be changing, even maybe censored, so that we are not sounding feminine or masculine. Because again, within the same experiment, when scientists were asking people to talk about the table, so pretend you are the table, how would you talk? So people from cultures where the table was feminine, they were speaking in women voice. Oh, hello, this is very nice. What would you, for cultures where table was masculine, when they try to pretend to be a table, right, very masculine voice, and they were trying to sound much more official than women in the very beginning of the exercise. So pretty much because of our linguistic knowledge in our brain, we already have certain preconceived linguistic features. And I think, again, that can sometimes be a bit, I don't know if miscommunication, but maybe confusion of why you are describing something as sturdy as the picture suggests with words as elegant or fragile, where, you know, to me, a bridge is really just something that should be very sturdy. So again, I think this is something that is very interesting to look at. If we continue to talk about linguistic barriers or linguistic maybe miscommunication situations, we can think of grammatical features that also may influence our decisions. So thinking about grammatical knowledge and how grammar shapes our language, especially if I'm looking at an English example, I can think of a job interview where after the interview, the person says, "Thanks for coming, we will call you after the meeting. Thanks for coming, we're going to call you after the meeting," or "Thanks for coming, we are calling you after the meeting." And really, my question would be, which answer do you want to hear? And I think here it just simply shows that most of you are extremely good at grammar, and you know this confusion. So most of you are choosing 3. There are a couple of 2s and a couple of 1s. And really, I think I have to say that I learned it the hard way. When I was in the United States, of course, my first experience, first boyfriend, and I'm so excited. This guy is telling me I will call you, and I'm sitting by the phone day 1, day 2, and I'm waiting for that phone call, and nothing happens, right? And so only later on I realized how grammar can also shape our understanding or our perception. And so will call means maybe sometime, probably you did not get a job, we are going to call you. 90% of chance, but still uncertain. And we are calling you 100%, definitely they are going to call you. So the third option obviously is the best. I do have another one, and I think this is always an interesting one. Here is a sentence: "The phone with a golden cover that John gave you is awesome." So what is awesome? What am I talking about here? All right, so now here I have the phone, I have the golden cover, phone or cover. So in a way, I think again here we have that miscommunication issue. This miscommunication issue can be very important because if you think that the person gave the phone, you're probably making certain assumptions or certain implications about the person, and your conversation might be influenced by the information you received. You might think, "Wow, John is really rich. You have a very special guy. You know, you are so lucky." And I might form a certain preconception. So really, again, this is a very grammatical confusion, or let's say barrier, that most people have. Actually, John gave only a golden cover because when we have a clause "that," we need to place it immediately after the noun. So we are talking about the cover. The cover that John gave you is awesome, not actually the phone. If I want to talk about the phone, I would have to say the gold covered phone that John gave, right? So it would have to be followed by phone that, right? So here, especially when we are adding that with, it gives quite a bit of confusion for many people. And I think that's a very, very interesting example of miscommunication or communication barrier. Culturally, where we translate, and our translation might also provide a different result. Another, of course, perception based on vocabulary here, I can say, all right, so you're saying awesome versus, let's say, lovely. I probably make a certain implication that John is probably a fairly young guy, because awesome is something that young people use. Awesome is much more popular in USA, let's say, than in Great Britain. I think probably people would use lovely. But again, lovely is maybe already becoming sort of a more old-fashioned. But again, these kind of things and the changes in language, in vocabulary, you have to live in the culture. You have to participate in movies, I don't know, watch a YouTube channel or something, because the language here changes very quickly, and I might be already behind. There might be other words that are overwhelmingly popular. I lived in the United States about 5 years ago now. This is my 5th year in Lithuania. So again, maybe there is another word that people are using instead of awesome these days, and I'm actually not aware of that. And here is another barrier that I wanted to share, sort of, again, interesting dialogue that happens on a date. So it says, tell me what you want right now. I will get you anything, right? We're on a date. Well, all I want is a large house, no room. That is not what I had in mind. Well, why not? The day is young. Again, I wonder what kind of ideas you guys are getting, and I think probably, or more likely, you are getting also very direct references. And I think here this is linguistic, but as well as cultural knowledge, and that very specific mini culture knowledge that you need to be aware to decipher the code. This conversation is very, very simple. Here again, we have a lexical issue or cultural miscommunication, where the person is really asking for coffee. And this is a very, very typical way of asking for coffee in a bar in, let's say, United States, where a large house, no room simply means that I want a large coffee, house brand, with no room for milk. So really nothing sexual, nothing completely strange, right? Where the person immediately thought, oh my God, you really want a room, or you want me to get married, maybe, you want a large house. Here we're just simply talking about coffee, and the person says, well, the day is still young, right? We can still drink coffee, so you will sleep, don't worry about that. So you can see how people who are not aware of one or another register, if they're not coffee drinkers, they might completely misunderstand the context and get into this really terrible confusion. Moving on even further at a deeper level, there is a very, very huge frustration when we, let's say, start talking about stories, or when we are interpreting things. So, for example, if we're talking about these two different stories, right? And you guys probably know the story of Cinderella, and they lived happily ever after. And then, of course, here is that second version of a story where it says, once upon a time, there was a young girl. She had to work very hard. One cold night, she had to fetch wood, got pneumonia, and died. And so if I ask you, which story do you like better? I don't know. I hope you like the first story better, or at least this is a story type that is very, very typical for the Western cultures. In the Western cultures, we are expected that the stories have to end up happily. And of course, unless you are into critical culture where things are purposely made different, then of course you will see the second ending. But obviously we would prefer a happy ending, and in many other cultures, especially Asian cultures, actually a bad ending is preferable. Good characters very often die, and there are very different lessons that are associated with that. Now I'm going to propose a slightly different presentation of the story. So now you're getting that bad ending, right? The girl got pneumonia and died. And here you get the end, right? Sort of the movie ended. Versus maybe exactly the same story, but somehow there would be the moral. When you do not have people who take care of you, make sure you take good care of yourself. Sort of the message would be, protect yourself. You have to really watch yourself, even if you're working hard, if you're doing something by yourself, be careful, watch what you're doing, don't do stupid things. And I think probably at this point, many of you would vote for the second version, simply because this is something that is much more popular or more acceptable for us. We really like the conclusion. And very often when I teach, let's say, argumentation, or when I teach courses, students will be giving examples, and people from different cultures are not sometimes willing to say, and the conclusion is, and I have learned that. And typically as Western teachers, we always ask, so why did you think that? Well, what are you saying? And here can be very, very big miscommunication, because people from other cultures will say, well, you think about it, that I don't have to tell you, or what do you want from me? I'm not used to this type of conversation or communication where I always have to say what I mean, because for them it's as if they are insulting your intelligence. Like, why do I need to tell you the moral? You should figure it out for yourself, right? This is what should happen as you read the story. So really, I think one of the biggest barriers to communication would be that Western yardstick, that we very often judge everything based on, let's say, Bloom taxonomy, especially when we are thinking school, maybe also linear thinking, where we want to analyze, evaluate, synthesize, apply, right, comprehend, and checking constantly. So even when I'm thinking about mothers, let's say from very early age, let's say you take European mother and you take a mother from a different culture, a European mother is much more likely to interact to a child and say, not only, so what color was the truck, or from the very beginning ages, but later on she would start asking questions. So why do you think he behaved that way? What is the hidden message here, and what should you understand, and how you should? So we are always asking these questions to apply. So now, if you were in this situation, what would you do? Can you analyze the situation? Well, imagine now you didn't get this, but you got that. How would you react in such a situation, right? So based on this Bloom taxonomy, we're immediately preparing children to be successful in Western system, in Western schools. Kids who come from different traditions and let's say non-Western mothers, when they read stories, there's much less questioning of why, of what did they do, what was it good, was it bad. Really, I think questions are much more on the surface level, like, did you understand, and can you recall the knowledge? So repeating the information. Did you observe the nature? Did you observe the sort of really drawing attention to different things? And for them, school can be very difficult. I think here I'm coming very much to an end, but I wanted to share one more idea about linear thinking. And I have two examples. And really, I think I would like to see which story do you like better. I think really this description is very, very similar, but there's a very, very key element where a Western reader is going to be completely frustrated with the paragraph. Can you guess which paragraph would make a person very frustrated? All right, and I see lots of ones, so somewhere in the middle, I would say, because I have quite a number of twos quite a number of ones. And of course, let me now talk about, again, these cultural, well, maybe not misunderstanding, but frustrations that come in the minds, let's say, of native speakers. I'm talking about psychology of reading, how we are, and also how language shapes our brain, how we process information. So, for example, the English principle would be that you have the idea, and then the ending of the sentence brings the new idea, and then the new idea becomes the old idea. So sort of you constantly build on the information. So if you look at the first paragraph, my father's house had 4 bedrooms and 2 sitting rooms. I would expect that from sitting rooms, you somehow move to something. In front of the house, my father had planted a lot of flowers in the garden. Okay, so now I want to think flowers garden. But then most of these, or garden really, most of these flowers were roses and tulips. Okay, tulips, can we move and talk about tulips? But now here is another shift. On the side of the garden, there was a large pine tree. So my mind, when I'm reading in an English mind, it's like if you have a vertical problem, it's like, oh my God, you're taking me here and there and there and there, and now I'm like, oh my God, what are you talking about? This is very, very confusing for me to concentrate on. Where if you look at the second one, so I'm talking, my father's house had 4 bedrooms and 2 sitting rooms, but now I'm using location in front of the house. Okay, so now I know we're talking about the house. There's a large garden. Okay, garden, in the garden. Okay, got it. Garden. We planted flowers. Okay, flowers. Okay, most of these flowers. All right, I get it. From flowers, we go to flowers. Then, of course, we get to tulips, but now we are talking about where roses and tulips. Roses and tulips are flowers, so surrounded by flowers. Again, logically, I'm sort of taken to the next step. And this is how the linear thinking works, where you are going from the information to the next step. So when they don't see the principle, again, it may cause frustration and it may cause confusion. And sometimes when we, let's say, write papers and we want to publish in very academic magazines, our style does not sound English enough, and they say, well, you have to fix something, and we don't know what. Grammatically, it looks superbly perfect, but if it doesn't follow the principle, then obviously for them this is not a smooth article, not an article that would probably be published in an academic magazine. So again, one of those hidden communication issues that might be very relevant to people who are writing. And I think sometimes this is very difficult for languages where we don't have a very strict word order, like Lithuanian, where we can change endings and we can change sentences into left and right, and we don't really have to make any reasonable connection. So I hope that your minds are exploding. I think you guys are super tired. I think I do have a couple of practical tools on how to improve these competences. And of course, I think this is not an ending list, but mostly I think we're talking about responsibility, that really talking means 2 people. And if you don't understand, maybe, both people are responsible for conversing. Obviously, empathy, trying to get into the shoes of the other speaker, being patient, because you can't give up, right? You can't just say, oh, there's no end, we're not going to come to any conclusion. So patience is a key. Understand cultural differences, right? And differences don't necessarily have to be conflicts. Adjust, be ready to change sometimes your perspective. Definitely risk get out of your zone, train your cultural senses. So meaning really that you have to examine and think, why did I do that? Why did I get confused? Why this offended me? See people as individual, try to avoid stereotypes, and always ask. I think that's where we came to, ask if you get confused. Most of all, I like one principle, the KISS principle, that means keep it short and simple. Most of the time, if you see that the conflict is beginning to grow and escalate, and the second person is not willing to understand, probably the shorter, the quicker you're going to end things, especially if the person is not important in your life, in your career, in your work path, and they're not willing to change. You may just want to say, you know what, I'm going to trust my aura. We just speak different languages. This is the person that I will probably not be friends with, and it's not worth fighting. So I think with that, I would like to finish my seminar, and I guess we have just a couple of minutes for questions. So thank you very much for your participation.